Hello and welcome back to another jam-packed episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me once again is the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Anderson. Now, you might think he's a myth, but having met him on a number of occasions, I can assure you that he's very real. And so are his suggestions for using original strength to build brute strength. This is a topic that both he and I like quite a bit, and we have a fair bit of experience with. And so we're going to dive into a little bit more detail on how exactly you can do that. Now, of course, part of it is going to be crawling a lot, but there are a number of other things that you can do as well, many of which get overlooked to the detriment, of course, of original strength fanatics, because there's a whole lot more strength buried deep inside you that we want to see brought out and fully cultivated. So we're going to talk at length about that. Actually, one great way to do that, if that is something you're keen on, is to do my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, as it is based entirely around the gait pattern and how to strengthen your gait pattern using very foundational movements, in particular original strength resets, things like crawling. There's also loaded carries, things of this nature. And as the name implies, it can be done in just 9 minutes. And it can be done as a finisher, as an extended warm up, as something you do on your in between days, any way you'd like to do it. But it's designed to be done in conjunction with your regular training, not in place of it. So it's kind of like people have told me this is not a good analogy because I don't know anything about cars, but it's like adding, I guess, a turbo booster or a NOS booster. I don't know anything about mechanical, whatever, but it's just think about a way to add a bunch of horsepower to your car very quickly and maybe illegally. Well, the 9-minute challenge is perfectly legal and safe and a lot of fun, I'm told. And you can expect to see a lot of gains. So go to 9minutechallenge.com, pick up your own free copy, and that is the number 9minutechallenge.com. If you type in NINE, you'll still get there. But why, do more typing and run the risk of misspelling it? Just number 9minutechallenge.com. It's all yours. With that said, Tim, welcome back to the Hammercast.
Alex, thanks for having me. Hey, by the way, your analogy for the car, I think with your 9 minute challenge, you're also building the frame of the car, making it stronger to handle the forces that the superpowered motor can generate.
I should have conferred with you before using that analogy because that is very true. So, folks, Tim has just given you another very good reason to soup up your soft machine, in this case, being your body, because it's not just going to be the engine tearing apart the frame. No, the frame will also be quite a bit stronger. This is actually one of the great things about original strength that I found in general is that people find almost like magic that their bodies start to feel a lot better, function a lot better, and then just move a lot better, even from very, very basic stuff like breathing, head control, rolling, rocking, gait pattern movements. But I think one of the mistakes that I've seen people make, and maybe it's not a mistake per se, but they're leaving a lot of gains on the table, is that they use original strength primarily as a warm up and then they don't cultivate anything beyond that. And I think that that's a good place to start, but I think that it only makes sense to try to push things even further ahead. Now, what are some of the ways in particular that you start your students off with the OS resets and then take them to the next level? Because you guys also, it's not just OS in the Original Strength Institute. There's also traditional strength training. You've got some very good coaches like Tristan Phillips out there, and there's plenty of iron being tossed around, but it's done in a way that it is combined very nicely with OS. So, like, what are some of the things that you guys most commonly do to integrate the OS resets, not just into a warm up, but also into the workout proper?
One of the easiest things we do is to include them as a pair, a pairing, or a superset for a movement. Like, so if somebody's doing, I don't know, back squats, we'll pair superset that with rocking. So we're having them press reset in between their loaded sets to help refresh their nervous system and ensure that they're moving just as good, if not better, for the next set because they're about to go under load again, and the nervous system gets tired and strain adds up. So we try to help people combat that by pressing reset in between their heavy sets.
I found personally when I started doing that many moons ago, I it's kind of funny to think about it now. I remember first buying Becoming Bulletproof 15 years ago. You and Mike McNiff wrote the original, what ended up becoming the original strength. And I remember being like, wow, this stuff seems like it's too easy to work, but it works like a charm. And it wasn't until a couple years later, I think it was after I did my first workshop with you out in Chicago, that you had mentioned something about doing the resets as you just described in between sets of your regular exercises. And so once I started doing that, similarly, I noticed like a huge improvement, not just in my technique, but also my ability to maintain good, strong, and safe technique, even as the sets wore on, the fatigue started to build up, and so on down the line. So I think if people could add only one other way of using OS, I think doing it in between sets is a spectacular way of doing it. Do you have any, let's say, odd pairings that you like to do when you have people do various different exercises? I have a few, and I would like to run them by you and see what you think. But I've found that sometimes the obvious ones, like rocking in between squats, it's like a must. But then periodically you try out something a little bit different, and for some people it just works like gangbusters.
Yeah, and that's the I guess could be the liberating and also frustrating thing about OS is that different resets may give a bigger bang for your buck for a different person.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, you never know how it's going to work, right? But if somebody's brain is looking for a certain amount of particular information and it receives it, well, then it kind of gives that person more access to their expression, right? An odd pairing for me is I and it can work with squats and or overhead presses, but for whatever reason, sometimes marching in place seems to be like a supercharged reset that just makes the next set better.
Hmm. Yeah, I know Dan is a big fan of marching in between sets of squats, Dan John. And I've done that as well. I've done like standing cross crawls in between sets of military presses, and I find that those work really, really well. So, I mean, essentially, marching pattern. My I don't know if I would call it a system per se, but one of the things I've noticed is it seems like there's three different applications for like the in between, uh, in between sets approach for OS. There's like what we might call like the usual suspect. So something that kind of closely resembles the move itself. I think rocking and squatting is like a perfect
Right.
example. In some sense, it might even say like rocking and like a military press because there's sort of this movement of the hand upward, as you're going back. And then you've got, let's say, the filling in a gap. I remember a great one that you mentioned some years ago, and this goes back. I think this was at OS Pro. You may have mentioned this. There was somebody who had driven like 4 hours to see you, which is like, you know, quite an honor, obviously. Um, but he just couldn't, even when he was rocking, I think he said that his squat just wouldn't improve. And so you had him try out a few other things and you had him do an elevated roll, and suddenly, boom, he could just squat deep. And it's like, what he needed was that hip stability. So the pattern itself wasn't really the issue, but it was the hip stability. And then sometimes there's like a wild card. You're like, I don't know what this is gonna do, but let's just give it a shot and see what happens. And then like there's no way to predict it or anything like that. It's just a feeling you get, and then boom, you do it, and it's like something inside you unlocks, and there's like all this extra strength.
So I guess if I had a wild card too, I would probably. Do you remember the rocking chair,
Yeah, of
where you rock back and forth on your back?
course.
Doing a shorter range of motion, so doing the rocking chair shorter and faster. I don't know. To me, that's like a wild card.
Yeah, yeah, that's a sort of a thing people also kind of actually this is a good topic to bring up is the idea that we've been brought up in like the traditional strength world to think full range of motion, that's the way to go. For a lot of things that's certainly the case, and again in the world of strength training, it's certainly better to let your ego take a back seat, do the full range of motion, get strong the way that you're supposed to. But OS is like the yin to strength training's yang, and there's something about it that has to be a little bit more go by feel and see what actually works. And so this is why I like this idea of like testing in between. And of course, this is why it's perfect to actually do OS resets in between sets of traditional things. And a lot of times people find that smaller range of motion is really where it's at for them. And if they're by trying to do the full range of motion, they're sort of like forcing their body to do something that it doesn't want to do naturally. You got to let it get comfortable in like a smaller range of motion. And a lot of times, like you pointed out, it just a lot of stuff unlocks and you would never expect it otherwise.
No, that's true. I guess it allows for exploration or curiosity if you're curious. But sometimes it's the smaller or slower range of motion that will let go of restrictions.
Yeah, big time. You know, on this topic of stuff that might seem unexpected, before we hit record, we meaning I, the royal we were talking about a gentleman named Rick Evans, who we both know, reached out to me on Instagram, and he was talking to me about how he's been loading his head in a variety of different movements. And some of them are not OS, some of them are body weight only. And although we don't really start people off with loading up the head, because that's a sort of a thing you want to make sure that you have like really good capacity with, before you put a huge weight on your head, and next thing you know, all sorts of other stuff can go haywire. If you build up to it, it can get you very, very strong. And he was describing some of the improvements he had seen. And this is where I think OS gets really interesting because of just how strong you can get by these really basic movements. And because we're talking about movements of the head and neck in particular, it makes perfect sense that it would be so useful given how much larger a baby in a child's head is relative to that of an adult. Like, what is the size difference relative to the body?
So, a child's head, an infant when it's born, the head is 25% as big as its entire body, but
Wow.
it weighs 33% on average, as much as its entire body. And that is lit to me. That is the brilliance of like God's design, because when a we're unique. Humans are unique. When we're born pretty much completely helpless.
Yeah.
But when a cow is born, it looks like a smaller cow, and within minutes it gets up and walks away. When other mammals are born, they just typically most of the time look like smaller versions of the adults, and within a little while, a short relative period of time, they're able to get walk around and do things.
Hmm.
Where humans, we're not able to walk around and do things for a long period of time.
Hmm.
And part of that is because we have to master control of that big watermelon that's sitting up on top of our little bodies. And it is through having that super large head that we develop insane strength through our center. And that's the strength that allows us to eventually stand on 2 feet and be completely unique from all other mammals that are on the earth. I don't know, man. There's just something really fascinating about, like, we're born with a weight room, and it's our head. And
Yeah.
once we learn and gain control of it, then all bets are off. Like, we gain freedom of expression, and we are truly resilient. Because by the time a kid learns to manage that head and he can get up and walk and then run and climb and do all the stuff that children are supposed to do, they are very, very well tied together.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned this too. Like, I worked for a period of time on a dairy farm, so I've seen cows being born, and I've seen them. They kind of hobble around a little bit, but then they're more or less like ready to rock and roll. And similarly, I'm rereading through one of my favorite books. Have you heard of Psycho-Cybernetics?
I have read
Yeah.
it probably five or six, seven times.
So have I, just this year alone. No, I really like the book, and there's a great analogy to that you just brought up too. Maxwell Maltz talks about. He's the author of the book. For those who are not familiar, I'll give a brief overview just so people know what it is. It's basically about learning how to use your thoughts to improve your life in general. This is a very, very generic uh, review of it, let's say. But it's a very fascinating book. And he was a plastic surgeon who realized that plastic surgery didn't always help people because their image of themselves was as a person who was not worthy of respect and love and all this other stuff. And so he started counseling people in many cases not to go through with plastic surgery, but rather change their own self-image rather than undergoing the knife. But he talks about the uniqueness of humans in a similar fashion. And he mentions that a squirrel born in the spring nevertheless knows that once the winter comes around, it has to bury nuts. And no other squirrel told him that he needs to do it. And the human instincts, we don't have a ton of instincts like this that I'm aware of. As you pointed out, we're pretty helpless for quite a while. But movement is our instinct. And we have a natural map of movements that we have to go through. And the closer that we honor that map of movements throughout our life, the more that we can get in touch with our own instincts, both in terms of how the body is supposed to move, for stuff that we want to do, as well as the stuff that all of a sudden gets foisted upon us. Whether it's being asked to help, move somebody like a friend to a new house or whatever the case may be. And if you really double down on the stuff that your body's made to do, it's incredible the kind of impact that it has. And so, you have done so much with using original strength to get freakishly strong over the years. And although head loading is not the place we would start people with, as I just mentioned, there are other things that you can kind of start loading up right off the bat and really training much more strongly. So, what are some of the, like, if someone came to you and they were like, I just want two or three things that I can do with OS that are going to be challenging and that are going to make me all over strong, what would your recommendations be?
Honestly, one of the secrets of all over strong brute strength is like what you're doing in your 9 minute challenge. It's loading the gait pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And load can be like load can be weight, or it can be resistance or time or distance. But if you load the gait pattern, and distance makes more sense when you're talking about, like, say, crawling, because crawling itself is putting a lot more tension on the body than, say,
Yeah.
walking is. So crawling would be loading, just holding your knees up off the ground. That's going to be loading the body. And then if you do any length or time or distance in that, well, then you're accumulating, time under tension through the load. But what you're also doing is you're flooding your brain with more information as you're going through that pattern. And you're learning how to breathe. And this is the important part. And I think this is where the brute strength comes from. You're learning how to breathe under tension and stress.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're kind of different. Like, tension is, the force or the strain that you're putting on the body. But then the stress also comes into, well, how's your mind and your emotions handling this tension and this discomfort? Because the tension under time, under distance, under load eventually creates discomfort, which
Mm-hmm.
is a different form of stress that now you have to mitigate and navigate as you're, like, especially if you're trying to stay on task and you're trying to be successful. So then you have to learn, how do you deal with that stress? But that greatly affects how you breathe. So you have to almost learn how to relax. You have to learn how to breathe underneath the tension, but relax underneath the stress to be able to breathe. And I think that is where you discover brute strength, or whatever type of strength it is you want to have to be successful in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in particular, one of the things that you pointed out that's so beneficial for it, or that is so beneficial when you're doing the long distance crawling or timed sets or things like that, is just learning how to realize that the discomfort that you're feeling, although it might be an indicator to stop in other tasks, when you're just moving your body the way that it's made to move, all it is discomfort. It's just, and that discomfort doesn't necessarily mean I've got to stop. And I've always found it to be easier to learn, let's say, a mental task through the physical realm than vice versa. Like,
Yeah.
whenever something happens in the real world and then you can apply this sort of concrete example into something that you're trying to learn, it makes it much easier to do that. And this is one of the great things I think about crawling, is just how uncomfortable it can get, but how gentle it is on the body and how far that gets you.
So I had a friend that told me, he was absolutely right, because I started thinking about it. So words mean, like, they have meaning, right? But if you gain, and then there's always truce between the body and the soul,
Mm-hmm.
and truce and agreements. But if you gain stability in your movement, then you kind of gain stability in your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
If you gain balance, then your thoughts are more balanced. Like, so whatever physical attribute you have completely affects how you are mentally and emotionally. And so if you have strength in your body, you fairly well probably going to really be able to exude strength in your mind, your willpower, and your emotions. But if you have
Absolutely.
no control over your body, because you're not using it and you don't have balanced ability or coordination, your emotions and your ability to regulate your emotions and your thoughts are probably going to be wrecked. Because without those qualities physically, you're going to be spending much of your time in a sympathetic state or fight or flight state,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to wreak havoc on your thought processes and your creativity and your ability to manage your own emotions.
Yeah. No, I think it's perfectly well said. I always think of the times where like, I've got a tweak or an injury or something like that and like I don't feel the same. I don't feel as good. I feel like it preoccupies me and a lot of times I end up putting other stuff to the side. I'm like I really need to work on, getting my back to feel better or my knee or whatever. And so all of a sudden all the other stuff that I would be doing to move me forward on something, I'm sitting behind, and life is just passing by. And I think that a lot of people, as you just mentioned, they're dealing with, instability in their body or imbalances and things like this, and then they try to do things that they used to do with ease when they were younger, and just the memory that, "Oh, I used to be able to do this so easily and now I can't," it's another source of stress. And so learning how to wield that stress in your training in such a way that it is becoming beneficial as opposed to just something that your body has to suffer through and then slowly recover from makes a huge impact on the mind. And then of course the stronger and more capable you are, the more confident you become. And what
That's a
is the
superpower.
yeah, a big time, especially nowadays. I think everybody's so self-conscious because everything is being recorded all the time. And, it used to be I don't know, you slipped and fell at the grocery store and it was like, within 2 minutes, no one remembered. Now it's like somebody caught it you know, on their phone and you're a TikTok superstar unbeknownst to you. And,
Well, even being confident in your own opinions now is like it's a rarity,
yeah,
because you can have your own opinion as long as it is in line with everyone else's, right? But if
yeah.
not, so
It reminds me of um, Henry Ford used to joke that our customers can have any color car they want as long as they want black.
yep,
And I think very often, again, we people like to they feel confident in groups. They don't feel confident by themselves. But when you're crawling, 10 minutes in a row nonstop, no group is going to make you feel more confident or more capable. It's just you, gravity, and your own fair flesh. And there's something about that builds that inner character that eventually comes out. You have to
yes,
be consistent with it, but it comes out.
yeah. And so that's a long-winded way to say that I think one of the paths to brute strength is loading the gait pattern.
Hmm.
And I think what Rick is doing through loading the head is brilliant because it's going back to the original way that we gained our strength to begin with.
Yeah,
The other thing loading the head does is that it does not impede the movement pattern that you're exploring.
yeah,
So, like, for instance, like if you're just walking around with a 50-pound weight on your head, that's excessive.
yeah,
But if you were walking around with a weight on your head, your shoulders and hips are still able to freely swing. They're not impeded. Like, whereas if you were doing a suitcase carry, which is phenomenal, and I think those are very worthwhile doing.
yeah.
But the caveat to that is that it impedes the natural rhythm of the gait pattern.
Right,
You're engaging in the gait pattern, but not the full expression of the gait pattern.
right.
So that's where I think that loading the head is brilliant. Even rucking, because you get full free expression of your gait pattern, and that when you're loading through rucking. So things like that I think are just like super movements that you can do to help boost your resiliency and real world strength.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one other thing that I think is not well, I will mention a couple of other movements that I think people don't load enough of, or try to find more challenging variations to do. I think rocking and rolling are both awesome when you can load them up, or when you can do more challenging variations. Like I probably the easier thing for most people to do would be to start doing them for just more reps, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I'll do maybe 5 segmental rolls and then I'll do 20 rocks and then I'll start my workout. But if you, I've on a number of occasions I've done it where I'll be like, I'm gonna do 100 rocks and I'm gonna try to do as many variations as I can. So maybe every 5 to 10 reps, I'll switch to something different. I'll make it more challenging, you know, um, or in the event that you can add load, maybe add a rubber band underneath your armpits, so that
Oh,
you're
that's
really pulling
phenomenal.
back hard. What are some of the other things that you like to do, or you like to have your students do once they have put themselves through enough of familiarity with the OS resets done standard style, that really seems to like light things up and get them much stronger.
I am a fan, and this goes back to crawling, but I like loading crawling with a chain,
Oh yeah.
or an uncomfortable task to do while they're crawling. Which to me that's phenomenal, because it does really strengthen their bodies, but it also, like that whole thing we were talking about, the superpower of confidence.
Yeah.
It really is a fantastic way to help build someone's confidence, especially when you put the math to whatever it is they just did. Like, hey, you just crawled 2 football fields or soccer fields, whatever, while you were dragging a 100-pound chain, while you were breathing with your lips shut, in and out through your nose. Like, right? Like, what can you not do after
Yeah.
that? You know, that's one of my go-tos for sure. Another is like getting into mastery of your own movements by loading the pattern with slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so whether they're leopard crawling, or whether they're rocking or rolling. Rolling's a great one. If you can roll so slow that it would make a sloth jealous, and you can remain fluid and relaxed and calm, you own every nook and cranny and facet of your ability to express your movement,
Yeah.
which means you have access to your strength, even though what you were doing wasn't like terribly straining on the body. You're teaching your nervous system. You're maturing your nervous system. And the more mature your nervous system is, the more access to your expression of strength, fluidity, and power it'll give you.
Yeah.
So I love playing with slow motion.
I do too. And actually, I think one of the really great slow motion things that I do on a routine basis, or at least in the past I used to do it on a very routine basis, was I would do slow motion commando rocks. And I learned this, and I would do it before my military presses in particular. I learned this from our friend Bill Savage, who was like, like he was like, try this before your military presses. I still remember this was like 2015. He told me to do this. And I was like, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. Sounds like he knows what he's doing. Sounds like I need to be doing what he is talking about. And sure enough, I mean, he was spot on. And I would do it for 5 minutes, just very slow. I would do like half speed, not as slow as I possibly could, but I would do like half speed. And I mean, my military press strength went through the roof. Yeah, this is, I think, a good example of that, like locking in the pattern and really connecting a more advanced movement to a more foundational one. And I like to liken it to that Michelangelo painting of Adam and God, like trying to touch each other's
Trying to touch
fingertips,
fingers.
like connecting, yeah, with one another. And that's really what it feels like, is that you're taking your desire, let's say, to put heavy iron over your head, with God's desire for you to move the way that you were designed to move, and you're honoring your natural divinely designed body in conjunction with your own desire. So it's not an either or proposition. You can get brutally strong with original strength as well as with the iron, but you can get incomparably strong when you learn how to combine the two of them.
Absolutely. And then the last thing that I like to try to get people to do is completely boring. But after they've done something hard or heavy, I try to get them to just shut their lips, put their tongue on the roof of their mouth, and nasal breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And then and stand in the power pose, even, where you're looking like Superman and your hands are on your waist, and
Yeah.
just breathing down into your fingers. Because if you can do that, you're telling your body so many wonderful things and preparing it to move for whatever it is you're going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
But you're getting your heart rate where it needs to be. You're getting your mind where it needs to be, and you're telling your nervous system everything's okay. I'm not stressed. There's no danger. There's no threat. I am good to go. Because
Yeah.
when you can breathe like that, you are good to go, and your nervous system responds in kind.
That's amazing. I have another couple that I will mention, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on. I'm sure you've tried them, but I like bottoms up kettlebell marching, as well as bottoms up, uh, particularly doing that actually before doing pull ups. Some years ago I put together a course, and I had a friend of mine doing the demonstration for the movements, and we weren't going heavy. It was like maybe 12 kilos or about 26 pounds for the bottoms up kettlebell marching. Likewise with cross crawls, just 2 to 3 reps per side, nothing crazy. And then I had him do like pull-ups before and then after. Before it was like acceptable range of motion, and after it was like, mid chest. He was able to pull his bar up and pull the bar to his like mid chest as opposed to his clavicle. And I find that it works like a charm. It's like it does something in addition to like waking up muscles that are hard to wake up any other way, because you've got to just stabilize naturally. So it's like all these muscles in your forearm and in your shoulders and in your arm and everything like that start firing up, and then you apply it to anything hanging related, and it's like night and day difference.
So if you're listening, anything bottoms up with a kettlebell is a gold mine,
Yeah.
no matter what it is. And it's just like the big baby head. When that kettlebell is upside down, it is essentially a big baby head that you're having to reflexively learn how to manage. And you don't have to think about anything because your body responds so fast with the reflexive strength and stability it needs to manage that bell. So it teaches your body all about movement without learning cues, without learning any skill, because you're managing that big baby head, or the extension of that big baby head if it's on the end of your arm, wherever you're holding the bell, whether it's overhead, out front, whether you're doing squats or whatever. And it makes complete sense that it helps with pull-ups, because pull-ups also reflexively activate the core.
Hmm.
But you're using bottoms up work to just spring load it
Yeah.
and prime the pump, so to speak, to prepare it for firing very fast and efficiently when you go to do your pull-ups. I mean, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. That one's a lot of fun. And trying to think if there are any other wild cards. I think that was a big one. Similarly, actually, I think, you and I are both fans of elevated rolls. And elevated rolls I find are great before any sort of pulling movement, whether it's, kettlebell swings or snatches, pull-ups, rows, anything like that. It just really fires up the back. And even doing them before crawling, you just feel like your shoulder blades move even better. You're just, you're moving even more smoothly. It's as the young kids say nowadays, it's really slept on or ignored or not paid much attention to. I'm sure you know the Gen Z slang better than I do, given that you've got a couple of youngsters at home.
Oh yes, since they don't talk to me and having conversations, like no, they know I can't understand what they're saying if they do that.
It's okay, good. Well, I'm glad
They
that I'm not the only one then. I feel like I finally
no
reached
they
that age where I'm like, I don't know what the young kids are even saying anymore, but that's one that I picked up, the slept on.
I mean, it makes sense, but yeah, I don't know any slang unless it came from 1980.
Good. Okay, cool. So you and I are still on the same page. That feels excellent. Now, speaking of pages, people who have not yet checked out your web page, I think they call it that still. Maybe it's website.
Maybe,
I don't know. You know, you're
maybe
yeah on the
we
information superhighway.
we do have a website. It's called originalstrength.net. And on that said page, you could find videos of all the resets and the movements we've been talking about. You could also find books about the movements and resets we've been talking about. And if you're inclined, you could find courses, hopefully near you, somewhere in a fun location near you, that you could go and experience it hands on.
And even if it's not a fun location, it will be turned into a fun location because anybody teaching OS has a magical ability to make all of this movement stuff very fun. So I highly recommend that you go to them.
Well, if there is crawling and elevated rolls involved, you've got a party
Absolutely.
wherever you go.
You know what? I'm in the process of trying to put together a belated birthday party for myself, and you just gave me an idea. Everybody's got to crawl an elevated roll. I'm not going to tell them ahead of time. I want them to think that it's going to be like a regular party, and then when they get here, they'll be like, "Oh, I got to crawl and roll," and I'll be like, "Just trust me. This is where the real party begins. You guys are going to have
Hey,
a lot more fun."
can I? How many times have you circled the sun?
40.
40. Oh,
Yeah.
it's a good year. Um, in your 40 years of circling the sun and giving your love and passion for movement and fitness and training, and what is your? Because I do not know. What is your favorite thing to do for training? Like, what brings you the most joy, or the biggest bang for your buck that you just have to do?
It's a very good question. Sometimes it's a shifting target because sometimes I find that there's something new that I um, that I need to spend a little bit more time on. But I would say the one thing that I always enjoyed doing, like without question, is pull-ups. If I had to pick any one particular movement, there's just something about pull-ups that I think is like a ton of fun. And even though it's, considered more conventional or not like, super hard to achieve or whatever, there's just something cool about pulling your entire body weight upward and coming back down stronger than when you went up. It's like the reverse story of Icarus, the guy who made wings for
Too
himself and
close to
flew
the
too
sun.
close to the sun and crashed. No, it's like reverse Icarus. It's like you get closer to the sun and then you get stronger as a result, having pulled yourself up, under your own strength. So that would be my answer. It would have to be pull ups.
I mean, that's a great one. And it's also like, the ability to do pull-ups in today's world is
Superpower.
becoming more rare and rare, right?
Yeah. I think it might have been Dan John who said it's never been easier to be extraordinary. It
Oh,
might have been. We might have to ask. And you'll be able to, because if I'm not mistaken, in September, you and Dan are going to be once again heading down under, going to
yes.
Australia and doing a retreat with none other than Piers Kwan of Queensland Kettlebells. And I think now might be a good time to pitch that because uh, people who went last time, including one of my longtime students, Dr. Justin Schuth, said that it was a blast and a half. He just loved it. And so give us some details on that, what you guys are going to be talking about, covering, and maybe I'll include that in the
Oh,
show notes as well.
that's right, Alex. Dan, John, and I will be in Rainbow Beach, Australia from September 4th through September 11th. And basically, it's a this retreat will be about longevity, how to keep the wheels spinning, how to make sure everything's moving properly, but like how to get the best out of your life as you circle the sun, decade after decade, right? And one of the biggest things or one of the hot things on social media now is longevity or optimization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens with that though is people focus so hard on trying to live forever or be optimized that they actually skip over and forget how to actually live
Yeah.
and enjoy the moment. Like, so they're trading today so hard for tomorrow that may not ever come depending on their best efforts, right?
Yeah.
So what Dan and I are hoping to illustrate would be this is how, like, if you want to enjoy your life, live and breathe and move in your design. Um, but there's other facets of that too. It's like it's enjoy each other's conversations.
Yeah.
It's knowing how to interact with people, knowing how to give yourself a break, knowing how to when to rest. In the world of optimization, some people just can't give it a break. They can't let their hair down, so to speak. But and it's learning how to savor. I guess would be a good word. Learning how to slow down things and savor life, so that you truly can enjoy it and have a good amount of quality time inside of the quantity itself. So it's not just about living forever. It's about living as long and hard as you can and enjoying every moment of it.
Absolutely. Using another psycho-cybernetics quote, putting more life in your years and more years in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that guy is a genius, man. He has a book called, I think you've probably read it, 5 Minutes to Happiness or something like that.
Yeah.
Which you could probably read it in 30 minutes, but if you practice it, it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a revolutionary. I actually, this is only slightly off course. He mentions in the book the Norbert Wiener, who was a guided missile scientist, because this is where the idea of cybernetics came from, which is comes from the Greek kybernetes, which means it's like the steersman. So like the steersman for the river Styx, for example, he'd have to put his oar into the water, and that's a stimulus that he's creating. But now the environment changes as a result, and it pushes waves onto the boat. So now it's moving the boat that he's in, and now he has to react to the waves. So it's like a feedback loop essentially, and understanding that uh, was critical to understanding how the human mind worked. And so I found Norbert's book, which is now a public domain. So I didn't pirate it. Kids do not pirate things. Pay the authors. But this was written, I think, in the 30s or something like that. And I can't wait to dive in, because to get a better understanding of how Maxwell Maltz figured out all this stuff in a time when, I mean, he was really on the cutting edge is, I think, super helpful. And I also do think that learn again, learning how to wield the power of your mind in conjunction with wielding the power of your body is next level for,
That is next level.
yeah, moving on to the whatever life has in store for you on that river that you yourself are steering your way down. And so, yeah, for any, this is a random side note, but folks, Psycho-Cybernetics is a great book. It's worth reading.
It is
Despite
a
the
worthy
name, it's
pursuit.
people. I remember reading it once on a metro when I was in Prague, and I saw these like women giggling, and I think they thought it was like a Scientology book because it just sounds like Dianetics, and it's like it's not, no connection whatsoever. So I always have to give people that you know the like side note. It's got nothing to do with anything Scientology related, despite the weird name. So anyhow,
No, it's a good book. It's a good
yes,
book.
it is a very good book. All right, well, let us wrap up, and I want to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure as always having you on the show, and of course catching up and talking training made me realize I need to do some more bottoms up stuff. As soon as I get off this call, I'm gonna go grab my kettlebells and take them for a walk around the neighborhood, I think.
Awesome. Hey man, thanks so much for having me on. It was great catching up with you. And I do, man, I hope this 40 that this year is the best year you've ever had.
I'm gonna make it so, as they said on Star Trek.
All right, number one, make it so.
All right, folks, thank you for listening, and as always, have fun and happy training.